Hey, Flintoid here with another Disc Priest Legion video. So tonight was the first night of Emerald Nightmare. Our guild cleared 7 of 7 normal, and then 5 of 7 heroic, which I thought was pretty good for the first night. 4 hours of raid. Now I wanted to discuss how I personally did as a Disc Priest, how the talents I picked, the strategy I used, and how it really paid off, down to the stat weights that I was discussing earlier in one of my videos. So the basic strategy that I used was, instead of hard casting things like plea and power word Radiance, my strategy was to spot heal people up with Shadow Mend and power word shield, and then use those atonements, those very efficient healing atonements, to basically burst people up with Penance, Lights, Wrath, Smite combo. So I know a huge style right now for Disc Priests, and I know people are still figuring out because of the raid had just released, but I see, like, every log I see is basically Radiance spam, plea spam, almost no Shadow Men, nobody touches Shadow Men it seems, and then they basically just camp on a bunch of atonements, and then once Burst comes out, they unleash Penance, sometimes the Light's Wrath, and they are able to quickly burst those atonement targets back up. So the style that I'm going for is more of a much smoother path, not so spiky where I do absolutely nothing in between these huge burst gaps, as opposed to my style is more of I'm constantly healing, spot healing targets, and then when those burst gaps happen, I still have burst. It might not be as much as someone who saved up, 15 atonements and then pushed penance, but I'm still doing something. I'm changing my style throughout the fight, as a disc priest should, in order to best benefit the raid at that point in time. So I guess I'll get into my talents. My talents did not change for any fight that I did. Any of the bosses, all 7, I kept. Castigation. Body and Soul is really strong. Um, it's much stronger than Feather right now. I see a lot of people taking Feather. I think it's a mistake. Masochism, I did not try Masochism in Raid. I was a little nervous because a lot of the fights require high mobility. I might pick it up for really low mobility fights, but for this raid, at least for tonight, I used Body and Soul. Shining Force is really nice. For one fight, it was actually really crucial. Illigeth, those little ads that come up. Let's see if I can find one of those little ads. These little ads that come up, and you know, you need to use these ads to blow up the door. You can actually use Shining Force to push those ads into the door, which is really nice because even after they die and they're channeling their bomb, you can push Shining Force and send them into the door, which is really cool, really useful. Mindbender, pretty standard. I didn't dare try my Purge the Wicked, Power Word Solace combo. Mindbender's extremely consistent with metagain, pretty decent damage. Twist of Fate, I found Twist of Fate to be extremely useful when I needed it, so there were certain fights where it seemed like it never went off cooldown, something like Ursak, the first boss. Cenarius was a pretty big one. Even the bird boss it procced quite often, but there was other bosses where it didn't proc as much as I would have liked to, and I think Power Infusion might have been stronger for those bosses, but nevertheless, it, it definitely gained its value. Halo was a must take. This did a lot of my healing and does a lot of damage too, so that was really nice. Grace was also a must. I look at these logs tonight and I cry myself to sleep with how many people are taking Purge the Wicked. I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to heavy burst atonement healing, but for this style, the spot healing style that I'm adapting, that I'm pretty much creating, Grace is a must, an absolute must. So let's look at some of the logs that I did tonight. So this is after the first night of raiding. I'm just gonna burn through all these bosses real quick, and I'll be straight up, like honest, how I feel like I did versus and what happened in raid. Because actually, some of these I didn't get video for, and I was really sad that I forgot to turn the video on. So, Nithendra, I think I did okay. I died to, I think it either a maggot or someone else kind of blew up next to me, which was really sad. So I think I could have gotten in the top three spots if I'd been maybe a little more aware of my surroundings. But I got US 5th for Nithendra, Illigath. I did pretty, I guess I shouldn't say pretty poor. I think it was 114k. Didn't make top 10, but that's okay. I died 80% of the way through the fight because of a really nasty dot, so be really careful. There's a really, really nasty dot that is like 800k every 2 seconds, so that kind of got me. Bird Boss with another rough one for me. So these two I performed the worst on for sure. Bird Boss was doing extraordinarily well. Planned out my rapture spams really well for when the bird like flew into the air and then slammed onto the ground for feeding or something like that. So really, I had really good HPS, and then I just fail boated trying to get across the bridge. Holy cow! I think I just I tried to jump down on one of the lower spider webs and just totally missed the bridge, and Guild killed it without me. Ursoc, I feel like it did really well actually. I got second US for this for Disc Priest. So Ursoc, there was a couple cooldowns. I looked over the video after that I could have used elsewhere. Like for example, I used Light's Wrath as like a purely damage move, and I probably should have saved it for one of the roars. Probably should have gotten Innervate, spammed up a bunch of people, and then Light's Wrath. That would have been the smart thing to do, but I used Light's Wrath to damage a couple times. And I also used Halo once in a really bad spot. Everyone was almost full health, so I just used Halo for a damage move too, which was really poor. And Halo, by the way, is affected by Grace, so the healing you do with Halo, which is a lot, it's affected by Grace, so now 30% increased. Dragons of Nightmare, I did like really, really well. I didn't really know at the time that I was doing really well. I just felt like I was just constantly doing something the entire time. Actually, I was able to almost stand still the entire fight and just be a machine gun with my Shadow Men's. So, I mean, all I was doing was spot healing people, and Shadow Men crits for like 800k sometimes. So I just got an insane. Here, we'll take a look. I actually got the highest healing out of all healers for this, not just Disc Priest, but overall. So take a look. Most of my healing was still Atonement, but a great deal was Shadow Mend. 65 casts of Shadow Mend, and plea was, yeah, 3 times of plea. Halo 4 times. Powered Shield. Smite was, oh, I guess I can't see without looking at damage. But so one thing I would like to point out with my spot healing. So let's go to something like, let's check out a Disc Priest, a really good Disc Priest that is just using this high atonement burst healing setup. So let's look at something like, I don't know, let's look at every, and this is a bad example because he's number 1, so obviously he did really well. But, like, okay, so look at this, look at his healing. So his healing is extremely dependent on these giant spikes. So he does virtually nothing in between here, like, what, 29k healing, 15k healing, like absolutely nothing in between these spikes. But these, when he spikes, it's like a revival almost, Just he just builds up, builds up, builds up, and then hits really hard. Really hard, really hard, really hard, really hard. Now let's compare it to something like my spot healing setup. So, and I understand that this is a bad comparison because I did technically less healing than him, but so I got second, for example. So this entire time, so these numbers are a little skewed, but this entire time, my healing is like flat. There's not really major spikes, but it's much higher in comparison. So in between, there's one major spike here where uh, I stacked atonement, probably got innervate, stacked a bunch of atonement and used it, but it's just really smooth healing throughout the entire fight. Really smooth. And that's kind of what this setup is all about. It's all about versatility, being useful, the most useful you can be at that moment. This burst healing setup that most disc priests are going for this, like nowadays, or at least today, is just, it's only useful when burst healing is needed. Like insane burst healing is needed. So let's see here. So this is the dragon fight. So this is the fight that I did extremely well on. So we'll look, there's not like a whole lot of burst. I mean, there's a couple in here where it's kind of spiky, where I stacked a bunch and then bursted. But you see like this smooth here, like lots of Shadow Men cast, lots of Powered Shield healing, Halo healing in here. And then I still have Atonement because I'm spamming Shadow Mend consistently on a lot of people, and I'm still getting that Atonement proc on those people, and then using that Atonement during bursts, during healing bursts. So I'm not just losing a bunch of value by spamming plea. Like look here, down here, I spam plea 3 times, you know. I never touched Powered Radiance. Not even once did I cast Powered Radiance this fight. And I got #1 of all healers in the US. So there's like this huge trap right now where people are trying to treat the Disc Priest almost like a, I don't even know, like a Resto Druid where you just have this insane throughput at this very concentrated moment of time, and then it's just like minor throughput after that. And that's a really, I guess Arresto Druid's a bad example, but that's how I feel like people are trying to treat this. Like, this is not a spec that is only good at bursting during like certain points of the fight. It's a spec that is supposed to like flow with the fight, and my damage is really good. Like, if I look at damage done, you know, like I'm bursting over 200k towards the beginning. Um, how did I do overall? Let's see if I can see how much I did overall for this fight. I know it was like, I know it was decent. So overall 118k still. So I healed for 328k and I was still able to do all this damage. Why? Because I'm not wasting GCDs, casting a shit ton of pleas and a shit ton of powered radiances and trying to keep atonement up on people. I'm spamming Shadow Men to heal people because they need it at that moment, and then I'm bursting with Penance, Light's Wrath, Smite, 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 you know? It's just a really, really efficient way to heal, really smooth way to heal. And then I powered shield tanks when they're at full health, or people when they're at full health. They still get that atonement buff. It's not wasted healing. I don't know. So this is the style that I've kind of adapted that I would say almost no disc priests are taking on right now. And I would highly recommend for people that are struggling with disc right now, I would highly recommend this setup. It's really, it's a lot easier than this crappy atonement juggle and then burst during very specific moments. It's a lot easier to do. In my opinion, it's a lot more useful, you know. And then you can switch really fast too. So if I have all these atonements out and then let's say the tank takes a shit ton of damage, well, now I have to make a decision. Do I let the atonements fall off or do I heal the tank? With this Shadow Man, you're doing both. Like you don't need to keep all these atonements up on people. Now, the only thing I will say is that because the heavy atonement style is keep like lots of atonement, like spread atonement style, the purpose is massive raid healing. So of course the Shadow Men spot healing style is not going to be able to match that during those points of time. So obviously for let's say burst raid healing, yes, spreading atonement and then using your burst will be the best type of healing instead of the Shadow Men. But you can do that in a fight with this style too, with the style also. But if you do this spread atonement and burst style the entire fight, it's just not as useful, in my opinion anyway. So, well, thanks for watching. Well, that is basically what I did for these fights. There's nothing really special, I would say. Most of what I did for these fights are pretty much the same. Just see moves coming, mitigate it with shielding, and try to keep like a few atonements on people with Shadow Mend and powered shields. And then when the burst came in, just um, burst them to full with penance. I will say to keep up with raid damage, I would save my Halo for these moments. So when Ursak, for example, uses his ability to charge and then roar, I would try to time it so that I had Halo up for that. So just obvious things like that to deal with massive raid damage. In other healers, I guess to get on like more of an extended rant, it's really other healers' jobs to deal with raid damage. I mean, the only exception would be like a Holy Pally, I suppose, but like honestly, your Resto Shaman, your Resto Druid, your Holy Priest, it's their job to deal with heavy raid damage. I don't think a Disc Priest is especially, I don't think that's why this spec was built, is to deal with that, because there's so many classes that already do. Alright, well thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. Hopefully I'll take down Heroic Cenarius and Heroic Xavius tomorrow, so I can input some video of that. Alright, have a good day.